Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this important conversation to talk about gender leadership in Israel. My name is Ruth Fletcher, and I am the current board chair of Jewish Silicon Valley and a vice chair of the Jewish Community Center Association of North America. I also have the tremendous honor to say that I had the great privilege to travel to Israel this past June with the Schusterman Family Philanthropies and the Weinberg Foundation on a women's philanthropy leadership trip that enlightened me to the significant challenges and opportunities faced by Israeli society in regard to women's leadership. I consider my time learning about the gender gap to be transformational, and I'm so glad we're all here together. Wasting no time, it is my true pleasure to turn this to Lisa Eisen, co-president of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies, who will begin introductions and get us started.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, and thank you all for being here. Really, really grateful for your participation. As a woman leader, can you even see me over this? Can I close it? Okay. Small but mighty. As a woman leader who works for two very strong and powerful women, the issue of women's leadership is really personally and professionally extremely important to me. And I've devoted much of the last years to fighting for women's equality and leadership. And I've spent a great deal of time trying to help drive more philanthropic dollars to causes for women and girls. And to this day, as some of you probably know, only 2% of philanthropic dollars go to organizations serving women and girls. And that is a shanda. That is a travesty, especially given everything we know about what happens when we invest in women's leadership. When women hold decision-making power, we can pull every lever of change in society. Communities are healthier, governments are more effective, businesses are more profitable. And as October 7th made heartbreakingly clear, countries are safer when women have a voice. The lack of women's leadership, the failure to listen to women's voices about the imminent threats facing Israel, the lack of women at the tables where decisions are made, where hostage deals are being negotiated, we hope. All of that has played a role in what happened on October 7th and all the suffering that has transpired since then. Only 1 out of 11 members of Israel's current security cabinet is a woman. 3 out of 16 members of the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee are women. 3 of 24 members of the IDF's general staff are women. I could go on. Across Israel's political and national security infrastructure, women remain a small minority. And at a time of real crisis, we are simply not capitalizing on the full talents that Israel and the Jewish people have to offer. So here's the important part. Changing this trend, investing in and prioritizing women's leadership in Israel, it's not just a women's cause. It's not just an Israeli cause. It's a priority that should matter to all of us. And I'm so glad you all are here, but there are so many people in this building who need to hear this message. To help secure Israel and the Jewish people, investing in women's leadership and voices has to be part of our strategy. Even without the support that women so need and deserve, Israeli women have stepped up. They're serving as soldiers, leading on the home front and in civil society. They're caring for their families and communities, figuring out childcare, trying to maintain their jobs, their kids' education. They're working on trauma support and rehabilitation. It's astounding what women have had to carry on their shoulders. They're healing people, bringing people together, and leading with conviction and empathy and humanity. As the Israel Democracy Institute recently reported, it's the women MKs, and there aren't that many of them, who are introducing and pushing for the bills that protect women against violence and promote their economic well-being. Women are accomplishing so much in the wake of October 7th, but they're working against the grain. They're swimming against the tide. This is what I heard time and time again from women leaders in Israel during the trip that Ruth mentioned that we co-sponsored with our amazing partners, and my partner in crime and very dear friend, Rachel Monroe. We cooked up this trip, and it was very special. But our experience there really led us to understand how difficult it is for women right now, and also how many inspiring, incredible women are doing unbelievable work in Israel right now. And that's why we're here today. We're going to explore the work of women who have devoted their careers to these issues, and we thank them. And we're going to figure out how we can help them lower the barriers. And to help us in this endeavor are three amazing panelists, and I'm going to call them up now, actually. Anat Fon-Ashkenazi, if you can come on up, is a champion for democracy and gender equality. She's won awards for her work advocating for women's rights. Yeah, great. She's the director of the Center for Values and Democratic Institutions at the Israel Democracy Institute, IDI, and before that, Itak Ma'aki, Women's Lawyers for Social Justice. Next, we have Ayelet Razin Bet Or. Come on up. She is the founder of the Dina Project, which has brought global attention to the war crimes that Hamas committed against women in the October 7th attacks. The project is the latest in her efforts to combat gender-based violence and advocate for women's rights. And last and definitely not least is my friend and colleague, Mor Yahalom. Mor is a national security and foreign policy expert. After October 7th, she was drafted into reserve service and led the medical response team to Gaza. She's the co-founder of the IPF Atid Shared Values Project and previously served as chief of staff to former Deputy Foreign Minister Idan Roll. So we have a group of amazing, may I say, badass women, and I'm excited to sit down with them and have a conversation. Okay, so we're going to start with something a little bit provocative. I hope you all over there can see us. Just 2 weeks ago, in a Knesset hearing, famous Israeli comedian Adi Ashkenazi impassionedly declared, I'm quoting, "I call all women who work for the state, pay attention. We have no voice. Not in the government, not in the cabinet. We are meant to cry and be raped. This is our place. And the few women who are in politics, you have to be focused on women. If you are a woman who has succeeded, do everything for women every day." This clip went viral. And before we start diving into your specific areas of expertise, I'd like to ask each of you, why do you think Adi's words resonated, struck such a chord in Israel? And maybe we'll start with you more.
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Great. So I think that the thread that will kind of bond everything that we'll talk about from our respective different perspectives is the fact that not only we need to work to promote women's rights and more representation of women, but the deep sense of being ignored that is shared by Israeli women at this time. We are ignored by decision makers, and I think that's felt mostly when we talk about hostages and the female hostages. It's a very different experience being a female hostage, and we've seen that, on October 7th and the horrific sexual violence that Hamas perpetrated. That kind of is a part of the way that we are looking and seeing and feeling this current crisis, and it's a crisis of leadership. I'm a board member at Forum Dvorah. What we do is focus on national security and foreign policy and making sure that we have women around decision-making tables in these areas. And that is kind of deriving from UN Resolution 1325, which I have better experts in this panel who can speak more about, but basically saying women have a unique perspective on solving conflicts. They have a unique contribution, and they're also affected differently than men from conflicts. And it's not only what happened on October 7th, but what happened since. When we don't have women in decision-making tables, the policy is very much reflective of that. At the end of the day, you mentioned this before, but we need women to work and advocate for women's rights. I highly appreciate all the righteous men who are sitting in this room.
The 4, 5.
To get to gender equality, we need to have more men around the table advocating for the same issues, but we cannot entrust with that. We need to be active on our own, and we need to make sure that we strive forward and interested in making impact. And we'll touch more on it, but there is a unique contribution to women around decision-making tables on a national level and on national security. And it's not just mere tokenism. We don't want representation merely for the sake of equality. We know, and Lisa, also you mentioned that, having more women, having more diversity in general brings to better decision-making and will make Israel safer and more secure. So I guess that's why...
More democratic.
And more democratic, absolutely. And I think that that's something that really just resonated to a lot of women with these remarks. It was painful, it came from the heart, and we are just sick and tired of being ignored.
Amen. Ayala, do you want to add anything?
I'll just say my last position, I was the director of the Authority for the Advancement of the Status of Women in the Ministry of Social Equality. My job every morning was to wake up and think, how am I bringing women's needs to the table? How am I doing good for women? I always said I have the privilege to be like one very biased on just talking in the name of women. That position no longer exists. There's no one who wakes up in the morning in Israeli government and her sole mission is women's interests. Unfortunately, I said this. And that's something that needs to change, and we're trying to, advance in that. And in regard to the women who, are in powers of position, I'll just, hang on high trees, or how do you say that? Doesn't sound right. It sounds very, Madeleine Albright said there's a special place in hell for women who, have achieved, are in positions of power and do not help others and do not see others and do not promote others. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, so I will add just another thing, besides all the policy and the fact that there are not many champions in the Knesset to speak about it, I will add my personal point of view. Adi echoes something with my own experience, our experience, not only to talk about on behalf of women, of representation, but she spoke out our experience, my own experience sitting in the shelter with my shaking 10-year-old girls, with my shaking neighbors, and feeling what is war is all about, feeling the fact that war impacts our day-to-day men and women, and no one seems to speak about it, to speak how it will affect our nights, how it will affect our psychological behavior, how will it affect our work experience, our labor market. And I feel that she touched our experience, not in a big words, not only in policies, but our day-to-day experience. And I think it was so important because this is the champions for gender equality that nowadays we need. And it seems like, and we'll talk about it in a minute, that we are missing all these champions today.
Well, the three of you are amazing champions, so thank you for what you're doing. I know it just, what the stories you're telling are so painful. I feel just, the hurt and the trauma and everything that you all are carrying on your shoulders as women who are just living day to day in Israel, but also who are trying to carry these voices forward and advocate for women, and it's a lot. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone who's in this room that we are standing behind you. We are here for you. You're not alone. It's why we brought a delegation of women philanthropists to Israel, and others have as well. And we're with you, and we want to try to help.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
You're not behind us. You're with us, shoulder to shoulder. And it's really important for me to stress this. I have great friends here in this crowd and outside also. We're in this together. Women's rights are being threatened. There's another friend. Anonymous friend, nobody knows. And this friendship, this connection, if there's something we learned from October 7th, is that we're in this together alone. So you're shoulder to shoulder to us.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, we feel that. Okay, so I'm gonna move into some specific questions for each of you, but I also want you to feel free, and you're Israeli, so you will, to chime in so we can have like an open conversation, and I'll also open up time to have questions and dialogue with all of you as well. But let me start with you, Ayelet. So in 2023, this is embarrassing to say, but Israel scored the lowest among 38 OECD countries in a gender equality index, scoring less than half the average of many Western countries. So what does that mean in practice for Israeli women and for the state of Israel?
So I'll add to that embarrassment that also in the World Economic Forum ranking of gender equality, we dropped 30 scores, and this is October 6th, right? This is before war, where everything deteriorated. So I want to share with you a little bit of the statistics of what does it mean? What does it mean that our life looks like? There is a 68% pay gap of women and men. That's also very high in OECD countries. We have a lot of children, you know that? It means that we pay the women, pay the price in the workplace. There's a definition, a definition called the motherhood fine, which you can see that from the first child, and again, we have a lot of children, from the first child, the salary drops in 30% for the next 10 years. It doesn't rise. It's unique to Israel and the OECD countries. In political representation, there are 5 female ministers out of 36, 15 head of municipalities out of 258, 30 parliament members out of 120. So our ranking dropped because of the political representation, and also a very strong element in that is the legislation on family laws, which is a totally different subject for a panel, the intertwining between civil law and religious law, and that's part of that rank. The meaning of it's important to understand that the drop in representation in political positions means that we're not around the table. It literally means that women are a blind spot to this government, to policy making. They just don't see our special and unique needs, which are totally different than men's needs. So, this goes to everyday life. And this is October 6th. On October 7th, and the war that is still going on, there's research that shows that women pay higher prices and disproportionately to men in domestic violence, in employment. And this is important to talk about. In employment, we're the first to lose our jobs, the salary drops. And because a lot of women are positioned in what's called pink-collar positions of education and medicine and treatment, all sorts of treatment, then in times of crisis, any crisis, by the way, if it's a pandemic or if it's a war, then they work a lot more, but they don't get paid for it. And also, there's a lot of implementations because we have circles of caregiving where it's not only us, it's our children, our parents, our husband's parents, our grandparents, all that. It really shows a deterioration, did I make up a word? In health, in women's health, and mental health and physical health. So those are the first, implementations of what it means that we're just not around the table before even being ignored. If we're around the table and we're ignored, that's one thing, but we're just not around the table.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think you don't think about sort of the concentric circles of how it just radiates out and the implications. Yes. And so we'll keep talking about that. More, let me ask you, traditionally the military and security have been male arenas. That has been changing in recent years. So I know that you're, through Forum Dvora and other ways, trying to make a difference in the national security establishment. But can you talk specifically about the impact and results of the lack of women's voices in decision-making in the military and in the security establishment?
Sure. I'll start by saying that it's very unique to Israel that the path to national leadership passes through combat positions in the military. And why is that? Because you don't get to be a brigadier general if you don't have certain experience, and the system doesn't owe you, and I mean that, a promotion. It is almost an essential part of your experience, and when you don't have women in combat, then you don't have women brigadier generals, you don't have women generals, and I'm not even talking about chief of staff. You mentioned some stats before about how many women are in the cabinet and how many women are at the Knesset and all that. That passes through the military in Israel, like it or not. So there are 5% of brigadier generals who are women in the IDF. There are 3 out of 34 women officers in the chief of staff closest circle. And that means that we then go out to civil life and are shunned from decision-making on the national level. So all that to say that a lot of it starts in the military and in the defense establishments and the different security agencies. Now, I'm kind of putting some other agencies like Mossad and the Shin Bet have done a lot of really, really good work with empowering women to take more leadership, and women are rising through the ranks. And that is a very good, positive change that have happened in recent years, and it's because of men who were leaders of these organizations who decided that is a goal and that women are capable and willing and motivated to do so. Now, we've been working in the Forum Dvora. One of our core pillars of activities was to promote the opening of all positions in the IDF to women, and that is mainly focused on combat positions. Today, 89% of IDF positions are open to women. Only half of combat positions are open to women. And we thought on October 7th, after we saw the heroism and bravery women exerted, that that's going to be over with. Thank you. Yes, not me. I was not there. But, we have some of the most known stories are the Karakal Battalion, women in the tank who really just saved a lot of soldiers in one base and then went ahead and saved the whole kibbutz from infiltration, and really just incredible stories of 18, 90, 20-year-old women. Incredible. We thought that after that, we are behind it. It's open, okay. It's very clear to everyone in the Israeli society that women are capable and willing. Guess what? It's not over. The fight is not over because eventually men need to make a decision to open all these positions to women. And what we're saying is, I mentioned women are capable, they've shown that. They're much more motivated than other parts of Israeli society who should be drafted. but they're not as motivated. So if you want to increase the number of fighters in the IDF, you need to open more positions for women and to make sure that you have girls applying to be in that track. Thank you, Sheila.
Yes.
So it's important to kind of pass through that point. There are a lot of a lot of points for optimism. I mentioned some of the security agencies, but I can tell you, I've been around decision-making tables in the past year, year and a half. You see more women running the show, and you see more men who want to have a family life. And that is also super important. I remember this one very big, like multi-agency discussion that two of my colleagues ran, and then you had a young male officer who came in with his baby because he also wants to be a father. But this balance is what we need. The IDF doesn't know how to do work-life balance. So if you want to move ahead in the ranks, you have to disregard your family life. And a lot of women understand that and also kind of give up a lot in that sense. But we see more men demanding to have their own family and work-life balance. So I think that's a lot of optimism and a lot of work that we still need to do. And we have to keep on pushing because it is very, very, very easy if we lose our eyes from the ball to have all of this achievement and progress in the public sphere with Israeli public who saw the bravery of women, that could disappear very, very quickly because of men in decision-making positions who don't see the value of women in these spaces.
Thank you very much, and we need some glimmers of hope. So thank you for giving us a little bit to work with, and we'll keep trying to find some more. So Anat, since 2013, the Israel Democracy Institute has tracked improvement in women's representation in the Knesset. And while the numbers in the current Knesset are not dramatically different, it does feel like the upward track has been halted or thwarted. So it certainly seems that female representation is faltering. So can you talk about how that compares to other democracies and what is happening? What are the forces that are thwarting us from moving forward at this time, and how do we change that?
Okay, so let's dig in the numbers in point of historical view. So since the establishment of Israel up to the 90s, we had only 10% MK women in the Knesset. It's like 10 or 12 MKs, which is very few. And we have seen a slow but consistent increase from the 90s to 2013 that you mentioned, Lisa. And from 2013, we can see stability numbers, approximately 25 up to 30%, which is like a glass ceiling. It's a quarter of the Knesset are women. And in this current Knesset, we have, as Ayelet mentioned, 28 MKs, which is not really so far away from the average numbers that we have seen. And yet, we can see a huge backlash. And I will point out some reasons why. First, we need to understand that among these 28 MKs and 28 women, there is a split between 10 MKs from the coalition parties and 18 from the opposition parties. Now, in the past, these numbers, this split was not so dramatic because women and men knew how to collaborate in the gender equality issues. Gender equality seemed to be a cross-political issue, and all mentioned a lot of effort to advance it. But this is not the case. Right now, the opposition and the coalition don't work in many arenas together, and specifically in gender equality. So this is very important situation to understand why we don't have so much champions in the coalition in order to advance gender equality. In the IDI research, we can see that women are the most champions to legislation. It doesn't have to be like that. We want to see men as allies, but the facts are that women in the Knesset are the most effective MK to advance proper representation, domestic violence issues, welfare, and while we can see that 10 members of coalition don't see themselves as gender equality issues, we can see that these issues are not being advanced. And these tend to compound over time because in the Israeli system, the ministries are mostly being appointed from the MKs. So then we can see that only 10 MKs from the coalition, and then what led to the position that we have only 5 ministries out of 33 offices, which is again, we have a chain reaction because we know from our research that women tend to appoint women. We saw it last government. We had 9 women ministers out of 27, and we had 10 CEOs ministries. Now we have 5 ministers out of 33, and only 1 CEO. And I will give you one guess which ministry is it. So it's the Gender Equality Ministry.
That would have been a real insult to put a man in that one.
Which is, I gave you a second to think about it, which is, of course, very, very important. I think I don't need to convince you all that this is very important, but talking about gender mainstreaming, it's not the perfect way to advance it. So I want to point out 3 main factors that influence the situation right now, and vice versa. These factors influence the lack of representation. So first, we can see the rise of ultra-conservative ideology. This among ultra-Orthodox groups, radical religious Zionists, and some segments of the Arab society. And we can see it reflected in a way in the border of the phenomena of gender segregation. And this is what is concerning the most about gender segregation in the public spheres, that nowadays in the Knesset, they are trying to reclaim gender segregation. Now, till now, gender segregation is a violation of equality. And what they're trying to advance in the Knesset is the way of thinking that you are entitled to be segregated. And this could change the way of thinking of equality. So this is the first factor. The second factor that influenced the lack of representation is the democratic backsliding that we are facing. The fact that right now we have a wave of efforts to weakening the judicial branch, and specifically the Supreme Court, which is a player, so important player in the role of protecting women. Weakening the Supreme Court will weaken gender equality. And parallel to weakening the Supreme Court and the civic courts, we can see just last week the effort to expand the power of religious courts. And I might remind you that women are not allowed to be judges in rabbinical courts. So this affects immediately women's rights. And the last factor that I will mention, and I will just echo what Mor said, is the fact that the war marginalized the voices of women and gender equality in general. So all these factors and all these numbers are really concerning, but Lisa, I promise to add some hope and some tools, because we can fight it, and we will.
Okay, well, that is a very good segue. I think we all have to take a breath now. I know. wow, is our work cut out for us, both in America and in Israel, because some of those same forces are ones that we're having to contend with here as well. So we now see that the challenges are steep, but let's talk about what opportunities exist for change. And I think people in this room especially would like to hear, what can we do? What can World Jewry do? What can American Jewry do to help stand shoulder to shoulder with you? We need you standing shoulder to shoulder with us. So let's start with you.
With me?
Yeah.
So I'll say I am, having said that, I am hopeful. And why? Because making change is not too difficult. Most of my meetings, especially as the director of the authority, was with men, stakeholders in different, powers of position. And I would get a lot of, oh, I'm blind to gender. I have good policies, good people, they get promoted and that's it. And it is not too complicated to go through the process of making them realize that if you're blind to gender, you're blind to women, because men just are there. I mean, look around. Who are you employing? Did you check who is enjoying your the policy or the program you just funded? And then when you start just like planting these question marks, they start getting slowly, but I've seen it happen, trust me. They start having those glasses, that perspective of understanding, not understanding what should be done, but understanding, wait a minute, maybe this thing that I'm not seeing has a special implementation on women, a special effect on women. I want to share with you this crazy, it's such an example that tells it all. Tel Aviv is a very gender equality-minded authority, and they funded these bicycles on the public sphere, like in millions of shekels. So it was a very, very big, important program that they did. So a lot of money was invested in that, but nobody used it. It wasn't, fulfilling its potential. And then they went back and did these surveys. Why aren't you using our amazing bikes? And then they found out, surprise, that most of the people who use public transportation, not cars, are women. And that women, Israeli women at least, prefer using not bikes, other kinds of public transportation. I don't know why. The heels, the skirts, the safeguard, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
The terrible chairs that they have in those bikes.
Is it?
Terrible. So uncomfortable.
Okay. Anyway, we don't want bikes. Tel Aviv Israeli women don't want bikes. And if they would have taken the time to check that before, all of this money would have not gone to waste. And it literally has gone to waste. It's just standing there. You've probably seen it in Tel Aviv. So this example I would bring to the Ministry of Treasury or to all these ministers that I would try to, work to gender mainstream. And it does the job. And suddenly you have the understanding what it means that women have other needs. And it's the same in I don't know if you know all these stories about the research on heart attacks, that women, do you know this? That women experience heart attacks in different ways than men, and we are we're not examined correctly. Women, they don't examine us correctly because the research was, surprise, made on men. Or the dummies that you do the crash tests of cars, only like 2 or 3 years ago, they made a dummy in a body shape or I don't know exactly what, but in a female dummy for the crash tests. And we're not the same. We're not good, better. We're not worse. We're just not the same. And why is it so difficult to understand? So I am hopeful because I do see change. I will not say which minister, but one of the things that I did immediately when I got into my position as director was to do the gender mainstream, a gender evaluation of all the legislation that is brought to the Ministers' Committee to decide what's going to pass in which way. So we would go through all the legislation, the offered legislation, the amendments, and write these evaluations on how it will affect women. So there's domestic violence. That's, not no-brainer. But there's a very big law now being discussed about the rabbinical appointments, having a lot more positions of rabbis in Israel. It's a huge thing in Israel, and there's a lot of politics going around. And you're asking, what does that have to do with women, right? So I cannot be appointed to be a rabbi. So this is a lot of money, and high-ranked positions that are going solely to men. And that's exactly what my position was as director of authority, to be there and say, you can decide this, you can decide that, that's political, that's your decision, you'll have to answer to your voters. But it's my job to put it on the table that this is a lot of money, a lot of high-ranked positions that are going solely to men. And I'll go back to that minister. I know that until now, nobody's giving these evaluations anymore, unfortunately. But when we used to come to the committee, he would go through the list and he would look for the authority for the advancement of women. So that is one of my biggest achievements. I told my friends, that's one of my biggest achievements, that minister already knew that those feminists will have something to say about it. So that searching for us, that's an achievement. And that's gender mainstreaming. That's like the understanding that this will affect differently women.
Ayala, can you say why the ministry, why your position was abolished, and is there any chance of reestablishing it so that sense of accountability and someone's watching can be reestablished?
And not you answer.
Sorry.
I'm trying to be very not political. No, really, it's not. I really was not talking politics. It's complicated. You say it. I was the director of the authority for the advancement of the status of women. They appointed the one director of the ministry and did not appoint a person for the Ministry of Social Equality, but did not appoint a director for the authority. So there's no authority.
Officially, there is authority, but their function is not fully as the authority could be. So officially, now we have the authority, and now we need to add more activities to this authority. Of course, this is not only about the authority, but also about budget to these activities, and about the belief, the priority, Lisa, that you mentioned, that this should be one of the things that the government should advance, which right now is not in the top priority, I would say.
Right. Okay, well,
Yeah.
you have the floor, so I'm going to let you give us hope, as you promised you would.
Okay.
And also, what can we do? What are the
Okay,
people in
so-
this room, what can we do?
First, I will share what gives me hope. My great-grandmother came to Israel in 1907. Her name was Sarah Ton, and she believed in gender equality, although she didn't see her mothers or their family or any example of what it means, gender equality. And she fought for the right to vote for women, and she had true partners in what was Palestine, Israel, to be Israel in the future, in 48, and she had a global trend to look up for. And I always think that if she could believe 120 years ago that she could change, so I can believe that we have some steps to do. So I think I will point out three main arenas that we need to be focused on. First, change the legislation about participation, to make it mandatory to have equality. This sounds basic. We know that in other countries like Spain and France, this was the effective tool in order to have gender equality. It's not an ideal tool, but it's the only one who might be useful. So this is like basic. The second thing that it's so important nowadays is to protect our democracy, to understand that not like many years from till last year, it was like two flags, gender equality and democracy. But luckily, last year, it was like, in a way, a dream come true in the fact that a lot of people may acknowledge the fact that this comes together. We have no democracy if we don't have gender equality and vice versa. And we need all partners to join our struggle to protect democracy and to understand that while protecting democracy, we are protecting gender equality. So this is the second thing that without it, it doesn't matter if we will have participation. Because if we don't have democratic institutions and democratic values, we can be 50%, but we will not have a gender equality. And the third thing, which I think in the short term it might be the important one, is to support the feminist field, to support women organization. This is so important. I have to say that I'm really proud of the women organization in Israel. They are so professional, enthusiastic, and really effective. But in some way, their position, their resources are a reflection of the women status in Israel. Nowadays, we are trying with a lot of partners, with the Schusterman Foundation, with the NCJW, with Weinberg, with the people, the women that came from Israel. We have a lot of partners for this, and we need more. Women organizations can do all the things that we want to do. And this is so important to help them to be part of the democracy fight and to add the gender perspective. And I think that this will be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I work a lot on gender reproductive equity in the United States also, and I feel like I could have given the same exact pitch about what we need here. So we do need that here as well, and that's why we need to be together. We need to be together as allies in this struggle, but we also need the men to be with us and people of all genders need to be together in this struggle because our democracies are being threatened, and everyone who is marginalized, everyone who doesn't feel represented in leadership is under threat. So we've got to preserve democracy, as you said. More, I'm going to let you bring it home.
I'm going to follow up directly on that note, and then touch on a few very practical tools that we are using at Forum Dvorah to promote equality. So almost 2 years now, I started an initiative together with IPF and Shani Reichman, who leads Atid, called the Shared Values Project. And you have two of our fellows of the first cohort, Adina and Ro'i. And the whole point was to, a year and a little bit more than a year ago, our main concern was Israeli democracy and how we keep it together. So the whole concept of the Shared Values Project was for Israelis and Americans to learn from one another how to preserve democracy and how to fight for democracy. And Israelis need to gain tools from the vast experience that the American Jewish community has. And we also felt that the American Jews, liberals specifically, kind of need another way to connect to Israel, which is also a challenge that we feel here. And we finished a year cohort on October 6th. Which kind of halted the progression of the project. We are now restarting it with 2025. But the whole concept, I think, because you touched on democracy, you really cannot have gender equality if you don't have democracy. And we need to learn from one another. And we have a lot of tools that we can share. And we really need you. And I do think that you also need us a little bit. So that's on democracy. On practical tools for gender equality, at Forum Dvora, we used more than once the tool just appeal to the Supreme Court. We've done that with opening positions to female combat soldiers. That's been going on for a few years, and it really is pushing the IDF to really face the fact that the laws of the country are kind of demanding the opening of more positions. We've also done that in cooperation with the Women's Caucus and Naamat on what we call the zero director generals, the zero CEOs for government ministries, which really was, you mentioned, it was a really nicer number in the last government, and now is 1 out of more than 30. So the government needs to give answers to why appointment after appointment, it's all men. So we are keeping on using this tool because it's effective, at the least, with raising awareness, and maybe when these appeals are done, we'll have some concrete progress. The second, and I think that was something major that we've done since the beginning of the war, we've started commemorating the memory of fallen female soldiers and commemorating the bravery of female soldiers. So I highly recommend you all to search the Warriors, Women's Warriors, COIL. It's a new website that we've started that just has a lot of, we try to gather all, but probably we'll never get to all of the stories of women heroes in this war. It's a great educational tool that I highly recommend using, whoever here is in education, Israel, and on gender equality. And that's another thing, and training. Training is a very big part of it. We're now doing a director's course that is specializing in national security and foreign policy, and mentorship program that is really, I'm obsessed with our program. I've done it 3 times. So generally, I think that having mentorship is so important, but having a female role model is extremely important for other women and younger women, especially in male-dominated fields, and media appearances. I don't know who here is Israeli, but in the past 6 months, if you've opened TV and you saw a news panel on national security and foreign policy, highly probable that you've seen more than one woman in the panel, and that her title, beside her professional title, will have a forum member, a Dvora forum member added to her title. Because we want to make sure that not only there are, you need to have discussions, it's the media, it's the news, you're going to talk about national security. We are fed up with seeing manuals. And we have really just worked with harassing news editors. It's like, hey, I saw this panel about the war in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. We have excellent experts on these matters, and you only had men. Here is the number of an excellent female expert. And we've done that consistently with every news channel, with every conference, the Herzliya conference and the INSS conference, and all these different platforms for visibility. You can't be what you can't see. I feel like it's the most, talked about phrase in feminism, and it is still true, and media is one part of it. So a lot of good tools, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up, and you can move your comments into one of the answers. So I want to make sure people have a chance. Okay. So we'll start at this table, and then we'll go to this table. And just say your name, and if you want to stand up.
Okay, yeah. My voice projects a lot. Everyone tells me that. My name is Elia. I was born in Israel, so I'm Israeli. A lot of my family's there. I'm currently living in Montreal, and I go to McGill University. I'm the co-president of Israel on Campus, McGill, and the club that we provide, which has been really cool. It's actually me and my male co-president, so we're trying to diversify. And I have 2 questions, one for Moab and one for Anat. Obviously, everyone can answer. I was reading stories that some female soldiers were actually trying to warn their commanders before October 7th that an attack like this was coming. And from what I understood, their commanders didn't take the warning signs seriously. And that's very, very unfortunately one of the reasons that we see us in the position that we are right now, because we were not prepared on October 7th. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how that has to do with women's role in the IDF and where you see that moving forward. And the second like Mizrahi women and Ashkenazi women like within the Knesset, and like I don't know too much about that, but like I would love to hear like if that's being tracked or like how like that's also affected within Israel society.
Yeah. Why don't we take a couple questions and then you all can answer. So I think both of you all maybe just quickly say your questions and then we'll take a few at a time.
First of all, you have a huge supporter and partner from Miami. Through the Amutot committee, we have been funding and supporting most of you, and I met someone that I met years ago, and so you're not alone. And the deterioration that we have seen in women in public spheres, has it started before the new government, the whatever government is in place? Has it been coming down, or it just collapsed and there's hope when all this leaves?
Okay, let's start with that. I would like to wait. More, do you want to start with the?
To your question, yes, women have been ignored. The spotters on the border have been ignored. There was an intelligence officer who wrote a whole report and started bugging every officer, a superior officer she could find, to share this report. So I do think a big part of it is about gender, but I also think that the culture in the IDF in recent years have been one of complacency, and one that it was harder to challenge a superior officer in the higher ranks. Generally, the IDF is very one-level atmosphere, and there is a bit more. If you've read Startup Nation, it's very, very well laid out there. But when it comes to higher levels, that has been a problem. It's also been a problem with policy taking, directed down from the decision-making, the political echelon, who've been almost a bit of obsessed with focusing on specific arenas and not willing to accept that there is what we call the conception with regards to Gaza and the threat of Hamas. So it definitely has a gender component, but the complacency and the policy focus has also been impacting this, has been factoring into this.
Okay, so thank you, Elia, for your question. I didn't touch the double discrimination, the women that are being part of discriminated groups such as Mizrahi women, ultra-Orthodox women, Arab women, etc. Specifically regarding Mizrahi women, we can see in a way it's strange because among women ministers, we can see it's out of 5, but 2 of them are identify them as themselves as Mizrahi women. And also in the numbers of MKs, almost a third of women are Mizrahi. But the opposite situation, when you analyze women that live in poverty, we can see highest numbers of Mizrahi women that suffer from poverty, that suffer from low income. So you can understand that although they are being, in a way, presented in the Knesset and in the government, their situation is not in the best situation. So,
And I will answer maybe about the gender segregation. That's exactly one of the roles of the authority, the functional authority. There were attempts to do so, but we would push back and, with the Ministry of Justice and make them write the policy by all the protocols that they made from different cases that were, there were different verdicts. And the Ministry of Justice have this kind of protocol to say when it's allowed and when it's not, the segregation. And so we would challenge this every time. saying that this is a slippery slope, and if you start here, it goes further. And we were able to set a standard for a long time, but now this standard, first of all, there's no one who's pushing back on it in government, and it is a slippery slope. I mean, there's these new protocols that are beyond imagination on going to nature reserves, segregation in nature reserves, and all kinds of bizarre protocols like this. And also you see it more and more voluntarily in buses, and nobody is challenging that. If we would get complaints from, I mean, we set ourselves as an address for complaints on segregation, on forbidden segregation. And we would turn to municipalities, to the legal advisors of municipalities, how come this happened, how come that is happening there? You need to, standardize it. And now nobody, civil society is doing it, but nobody in government is holding this voice.
To add to this, the general attorney has a very important role in order to block the gender segregation, but the general attorney is under a very massive attack nowadays, so you can understand that there are so the power to block it are going and weakening.
It's not even brought to her. That's the thing. We would bring it to the Ministry of Justice, and they would decide on it if it's allowed or not. Now it's not even brought on it.
She'll probably be the next victim of the acts. I mean, trying to eliminate all dissent. So
Yeah, she's already a victim
finger in
because
the dike.
this exactly. I don't understand how she faced to sit every week in the government meeting and just to be all the time to hear about that she needs to be fired.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
She's courageous, and we all need to stand up as strongly as she does. Deborah, I know you had a question. Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, you can go, and then.
Okay, so you were speaking about policy issues and the high-ranking level, and I actually wanted to ask a very practical question. Do you think that Israel is prepared to hear a unique voice that's a female voice? Meaning, are we shooting ourselves in our leg by speaking authentically a female voice, or should we be coming in a camouflage of a man's voice? And I think there's a certain tipping point where you can.
Have the exact tipping point. I can talk about that. Do you want to collect another question?
Yeah, we'll take one more from Daphne.
Hi, my name is Daphne Price. I'm the executive director of the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. First of all, thank you, everyone. I want to say, first of all, that I have two daughters who live in Israel. One right now is a lone soldier. The other will be a lone soldier after next year when she graduates high school this year. They're both Orthodox and they're both serving, or they will be serving. And it's my honor and their honor. I also want to add that, and I'll get to a question. I also want to add that I'm a graduating class of Yeshivat Maharat, and we have 12 women who are studying in Israel, 2 of whom are serving in Miluim. So I want to name that there is a track of women who are on the track to be Orthodox rabbis in Israel, and there are also other Orthodox women who have taken tests in the Rabbanut, and the court has ruled in their favor. So there is pathways forward. So my question is, where are you with trying to engage with, and I'm not talking about the Haredi women where there's the whole other culture dynamic there, but the women in Dati-Leumi communities who are serving, who are learning, who are fighting or having leadership roles. Where are you with engaging with them and creating that intersection as a strategy to achieve success?
I would like to go first.
So much to say. Excellent questions. Well, there's according to a lot of studies, the magic number is 3. You need to have 3 women in a mainly dominated space for women to feel comfortable in expressing their unique voice. When there's one, she feels like she needs to be one of the guys, and the guys look at her and say, you see, the woman is like this. So she's an example of all women, and that is it. And you really see it with a lot of discussions that I have with more senior members of the forum who've been like the first brigadier general, the first of her, like really breaking the glass ceiling. And a lot of the time, they really took on more manly behavior because they saw that was helpful to their progression. And I mean, they managed to do so, and I admire that. But when you have two women, a lot of the time they're kind of put against one another and like being the best woman of the group. And when we have three, it's enough representation so they feel like they have allyship inside the group, and they're able to express their unique voice. So that, when regards to, it's been done in the American military. When you have you open a program and a specific role to women, you need to have at least 3 in the program for that to be implemented. Now, on a national level, I think Israelis have been ready for years for a unique female voice. And I ask myself why women don't put themselves in these situations, and sometimes it's not men holding us back, sometimes we are holding ourselves back, and we also need to discuss that. Politics is messy, politics is ugly, and it's a lot of bullshit. Sorry for pardon my French. So a lot of the time, women would prefer doing a backstage position that is effective and is about getting results, and then the politicians, the men, they go and they trash one another in the media and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think that's something that we also need to ask ourselves. Are we ready to voice our own unique,
We had a female prime minister before. In other countries, women were able to vote.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, which I actually think, I was reading on October 7th, I was reading a feminist biography of Golda Meir, The Only Woman in the Room, highly recommended book. And a lot of, she was criticized for being, the only man. It's not a nice phrase, so I'm not going to say it. But it's a bit, because she had what was described as, manly characters, but it was just her. This, her being her. And we also need to feel comfortable not apologizing for not being nice and kind and generous and cooperative.
A double standard.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who wants to address? We only have a couple more minutes, so I want to make sure we can address
just to
Daphne's
add,
question.
I couldn't agree more with Mo. And I want to answer to you that we don't have a choice. We know for a fact from comparative research that gender voice stopped wars. We know it from North Ireland, and we know it from Liberia. The gender voice is so crucial in stopping wars, not less than that, and to blocking backsliding democracy, just like in Poland case. So we don't have the choice to give up, although it is really hard to be in this room, the decision-making room, and to speak out loud. The gender voice, which might be different, weakened, but it's so important because this is the way to get the results. So this is important. And I want to add that we know how to make broad coalitions. And in this case, the religious Zionist groups, feminist religious Zionist groups, are crucial to this coalition. I know that they have so many challenges. Some are common, some are different. But this is part of the feminist coalition, must be. And there are allies. It's part of our work as feminists. So this is very important.
And I'll just say, while you have a lot of rabbis in the religious Zionist movement that are very much against women serving in the military, you see more and more women from that community with higher motivation to serve, in intense combat positions. It's really inspiring. And yes, that is definitely something that we are focusing on. We'd love to catch you later to share more.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank this amazing panel.
Thank you.
We hear the power. I like to say that we need to be fierce and joyful warriors. We need all of you in this room to be warriors. We need all the men and others to be our allies. I think you have heard what we're up against, but you've also heard causes for hope. You've heard opportunities to get involved. You've heard practical ways that we can make a difference. This is crucial, not only for women in Israel and for Jews around the world. This is crucial for the future of Israeli democracy, for the security of the Jewish state, for our future as a people. So we all must do this. Please go out and be joyful warriors.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you really to the Sisuam Foundation and New York Federation, Land Federation, Weinberg. Really, we have some incredible partners here, and we really, really, really thank you.
We're happy to be your partners.